Welcome to Paper Quest.
I'm Jessie.
And I'm James.
And we're two friends teaming up in our ongoing quest through the Infinite Library.
During a main quest, we discuss our current buddy book, and during a side quest, we share our recent solo reads with each other.
You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Please rate, like, or subscribe wherever you're listening, and check out the show notes for all the links in the description.
Check the Facebook page for our upcoming release schedule, and consider supporting the show with our $1 Patreon, which also grants access to each episode 2 days early. But for now, please join us in another episode.
This is Paper Quest.
Alright, welcome back to our next side quest. I think both of us have a fair amount to share this time. What's your book count for this episode?
6.
3 for me. So once again, you'll have a little bit more to talk about. Okay, cool. So what book do you want to start with?
So I'm going to start with a book that I've been eyeing for a long time, and I found it on sale. I think it was like buy two, get one free or something at Barnes & Noble. I was very excited. So it's called The Daughter of Sparta, and it's by Clair M. Andrews, and it's book 1 of maybe 3. I don't even think the next book is out yet. Basically, we're following a 17-year-old girl named Daphne, very Bridgerton, and she was actually adopted into a Spartan family and raised. Even though she was raised as a Spartan woman, she's never really accepted into Spartan culture, but it's more like they're tolerated. Like, they have wealth, they have the possibility of good marriages, but they're never truly Spartan. And in a strange twist of fate, she finds herself making a deal with the goddess Artemis to save her brother's life. She has 2 older brothers, and he was turned into a deer by the goddess of hunt when...
Sure, why not?
Yep, when she caught him spying on her taking a bath. So,
okay.
So now Daphne must find 9 missing items and return them to Mount Olympus before the end of summer. And she's joined by Artemis's twin, which is Apollo, and he is the goddess of he is the god of prophecy. And, you know, of course, she now holds the fate of the whole world and Olympus in her hands. So it was good. It hit all the wickets for me. It was mythology. It was a retelling. There's mysterious circumstances, but I did give it a 3 out of 5 because it was a lot. Like, if you've listened to our podcast, I read a lot of retellings, specifically Greek retellings. I know a lot of mythology, and I was confused.
Oh, no.
There were times where I was just like, a god or goddess pops in for literally a page, and you don't hear from them again for, like, ever. And then they pop up again almost at the end of the book. And you're like, where have you been this entire time? And so, yeah, just a little bit confusing and a lot of unanswered questions that I assume will get answered in the additional books because there are more coming. So I'm going to keep reading.
Of course.
But, like, it was enough. And maybe it was supposed to be kind of a lot of hanging chads, a lot of, like, there's more to tell and talk about. But if you're not really into Greek mythology, like if you don't know that Artemis is twins with Apollo, it might be a little enjoy.
Yeah, having the background knowledge going into it is always helpful with those kinds of novels.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it seems like it's expected, like most people just should know these things, and I certainly don't. I barely know gods outside of certain, like, video games that I've played. Like,
yeah, like
my knowledge
Zeus.
is... yeah, like I know, like,
ones.
characters in God of War or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep,
so.
Yep. So this is a brand new series with no ending in sight right now?
Yes.
Okay.
I know that there's at least one more book. I think I've already pre-ordered it.
That's always a scary choice to start a new series. Yeah, when you're not sure how long it's gonna go. when
So
you're 50 years old and the final novel comes out.
it feels like it would be a standard trilogy.
Okay.
Because, like I said, there was a lot left hanging, and I feel like there's probably going to be more introduction of like her interacting with other gods. Like I said, they pop in and out, but the primary people she interacts with are Apollo and Artemis. And I feel like now she's, obviously she survives, but I feel like she's going to have some increased interaction. So yeah, we'll see. I'm interested. 3 out of 5. I want to keep going. I think it's going to get better.
Okay, sounds good. I'm sure we will not have to wait too long until we hear the next one. So,
Yeah.
Let's see. I'll do one real quick, and then I'll let you do a few.
Sure.
I didn't have massive success these last 2 weeks with like 5-star reviews or anything. I'll start with I'll just go in order of how I read them. So I'm gonna do the first one is The Story Paradox by Jonathan Gottschall. It is a nonfiction book. It is subtitled How Our Love of Storytelling Builds Societies and Tears Them Down. When I first started reading this book, there's like a sort of intro, and I guess there was a book before this. Not that they technically have to go hand in hand or read one before the other because it's nonfiction, but I guess his first book that he decided to write was like the positivity of storytelling in our modern day society, or I guess in life in general. And this one talks more about how it negatively impacts society and people. I felt it's a fine read. I personally understand and know a lot of what's being told to me in this book, so nothing was like amazing or surprising. It's definitely a good novel, again, for the right crowd. I've said that a lot recently. This is a better reviewed book for the right person. That person isn't necessarily me, although I still got some stuff out of this. It just comes off a little bit, again, for me, a little bit more common sense and something I just kind of understood really well. But it does a lot of examples of storytelling throughout history, a lot of random notes and tidbits and references. What are we considering a story? Is it just the book we read? Is it something somebody tells us? Is it a news headline or a news story? And is it someone's post on Facebook or Instagram? Like, what counts as a story? How much time do we spend in our own real lives versus a story or somebody else's life? So you can sort of imagine how that goes. I mean, we kind of all get that. But I found it more interesting when he talked about storytelling in the past. I liked a lot of the past examples too. Like, apparently this might be common knowledge. You might even know this. But one thing in the book was like, there's a sort of a myth or urban legend where Ernest Hemingway bet his friends $10 that he could tell an entire novel in 6 words, and then he won the bet. And his 6-word novel was For Sale, Baby Shoes, Never Worn. And they were all like, nope, yep, you've taken every definition of a story and fit it into 6 words. Because you're already thinking like, what is the story? Why are they for sale? Did the baby die? Was it up for adoption? Like, what happened? Like, your mind's running through all these different scenarios. So it was an interesting book. I loved it for the examples, but nothing I listened to or read was like mind-blowing or eye-opening. It was like, yeah, our society is kind of falling apart with the way we do things right now.
Yeah.
But that was my first book, The Story Paradox by Jonathan Gottschall.
And this is like, you've recently taken on the endeavor of nonfiction books.
Yes, I wanted to do one at least once an episode, but that's not always possible.
How did this compare to the octopus
novel?
Much better.
Yeah, the Life of the Octopus or whatever it was called, that was a much better novel. But because it was a subject that I knew nothing about, so I learned a ton of cool things. Yeah.
I think that's interesting, and I'm intrigued to like see how your thoughts and feelings about nonfiction books evolve, because I feel like I read, I don't know, probably like 1 or 2 a month, because I do like a lot of like history stuff. So yeah, I'll be interested to see.
Yeah, I would, and I I was expecting. I won't go too hard on this right now. I'll move on. But I was expecting something different from this novel. Like in my mind, I was imagining an entirely different kind of book. So when I started reading this and realizing what I was getting to, I was like, oh, okay, this isn't necessarily gonna be like new or mind blowing, but I'm gonna finish it. It's something I can talk about. But yeah, so what is your next one?
So I have a couple I'm really excited about. So the next book I read is called Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. Baldree? Sure. I gave it a 5 out of 5. And this was one that I heard about on BookTube. I can't remember. I can picture her so perfectly, but I can't remember her name, who recommended it. But it was like her most surprising read of like the first half of the year. And it is literally, I think I mentioned this to you off podcast, but it is a story about an orc named Viv. She's retired from her life of adventuring. Think D&D, think going on a quest. And she's ready to put aside her giant sword. I think its name was like Bloodletter or something. And she wants to step behind the counter of her very own coffee shop. And so it is a very D&D, like her adventuring party comes to her opening, and it's literally just the coziest story you didn't know you needed. It's like 200 some pages, very short, very easy to read. The characters are brilliant because you have this person who her whole life, or at least in recent history, her whole way of being has been, someone pisses her off and she's just gonna kill them. So like when she has to deal with the local kind of tax collector, she's like, her friends who've come to visit her, like, we can just take him out for you, like.
Yes.
and she's just like, no, like that's not how things are done. And she has to learn how to like small talk, and it's kind of one of those things where it's like she's doing something very mundane, right? She's career switching. She's saved up her money and she's going for her life's passion, which is gnomish coffee, and no one else knows what coffee is. They call it bean water. They are very skeptical, and she meets a little what is he called? He's like a little rat creature. Think like were-rat, but that's not what he's called, and I can't remember what he's called. But his name is Mouse, or something like that. And he is a baker, and he like barely speaks in the tiniest little voice, and she's like 7 foot tall, 8 foot tall, and he starts making croissants, and like no one's ever had them before, and it's just.
I'm just picturing Ratatouille now. Ratatouille in D&D.
I think he's like 2 feet tall, but yeah.
He's D&D size, yeah. He's like some bigger creature, yeah.
And it's just very cute and sweet, and I literally immediately looked up if the author had any more books like associated in the same like world, and he does not. But I hope he writes more because I will be buying them. I think it's independently published. I think it's, it's just like this random book that someone found and is. I highly recommend. I will be reading it again. It was so, like, I literally want, like, snow. I want a cup of coffee and to curl up and reread it. So.
Yeah, and I think this is one that I might have to read myself as well. It seems like it's going to happen. It's inevitable. Someone's a really big fan of RPGs and coffee, for sure.
Yeah. And then the next book, I actually, someone at my work, they suggested I read this book because it was similar to when we read the Midnight Library. Mm-hmm. And it's called Oona Out of Order. And I finished it and I was like, I wish I'd read this with James because it was so good.
Okay.
I will say I gave it a 4 out of 5. But it is something that I might read again. The 4 out of 5 was more that it's like a little hard to follow. But it's written by Margarita Montimore. And just as a summary, it's New Year's Eve, 1982. So think big hair, think, boom boxes. And Oona Lockhart has her whole life before her. At the stroke of midnight, she'll turn 19. And the year ahead promises to be one of consequence. Should she go to London to study economics or remain at home in Brooklyn to pursue her passion for music and be with her boyfriend? As the countdown to New Year's begins, Oona faints and awakens 32 years in the future in her 51-year-old body. Greeted by a friendly stranger in a beautiful house she's told she owns, Oona learns that with each passing year, she will leap to another random age, and so begins Oona out of order. So she's 19 mentally. She has all the experiences of 19-year-old Oona, but she's 51. And her body has had all the experiences of a 51-year-old. So she's put on weight, she has scars, she's a tattoo, she doesn't know what it means or what it's for. And this stranger hands her a letter. She's like freaked out, right? Like you wake up physically different in a place you've never seen before with, cell phones, CDs, like all these things. It's 2015 when she wakes up and a stranger going, "Here, read this. Don't freak out. It's okay." And like she doesn't know how to get on the subway now because it doesn't take cash. She doesn't know how to use the cell phone because she's never seen one. And every year she writes herself a letter, and the big thing that her self has decided is like no spoilers. And so they don't explain who's this. They explain like the very high level. They'll be like, you're dating this person. We really like him. He's great. But then she meets him and she doesn't have these same experiences. And she's like, what do you do? Like, what's your last name? How did we meet? And no one knows except for her mom what's going on. And this nice stranger who's her assistant. And it was just so fascinating because, again, she's jumping from 19 to 51 to 25 to 60. And no one understands. Like a couple people, she says, like, oh, I have a memory disorder. Like I had a traumatic accident and now I like don't remember everything. But that year doesn't matter to the next year, to her. Like everything she does at 21, it matters to the body and it does affect her whole life. But when the clock strikes, she's not going to have to deal with any of it.
Right.
It was just very interesting and very intelligent and like weird to see how she deals with things, and interesting of like someone's like, oh, you're so good to see you. I haven't seen you in 2 weeks. Why haven't you come into the coffee shop or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
And she's literally like, I've never been here. I don't know who you are. And they're like, oh, come to Jane's house. And she's like, who the heck is Jane? But she can't say any of that. And then on top of it, it's like the internet, stocks, like they talk about different companies and she's just like, I don't. Or like vice versa. She'll jump back to the 80s and be like, oh, just Google it or whatever. And no one knows what that is. And they think she's crazy because she's like talking about things they've never heard of. So
that's amazing. Yeah, I can see the Midnight Library comparisons. It's very similar working time travel idea.
Yeah.
Yep, I like it. No, that sounds really cool.
Yeah.
Which one's better?
Good. I would say Midnight Library, I definitely had a bigger impact.
Okay.
But I think this book I really liked, or I'm very excited about it because it is more recent, but I feel like I would recommend Midnight Library more often.
Do you think your opinion would flip had you read this one first? Would the Midnight Library be less impactful because they're so similar?
I don't think so. I think that the Midnight Library really makes you think about you can apply it to this, how we live our lives. You can't apply jumping in the way she does. Like, it's cool to think about,
It's
but it's
more of a
not
fun
like,
story, but you can
Yeah.
you can more sympathize with Midnight. Okay. No,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that makes sense. Well, good. I'm glad I read the Midnight Library then.
Yeah. All right, what else do you have?
Okay, I'm gonna do well. You've done a side quest on it before on your own a long time ago. At
I'm
this
so
point,
excited.
Iron Widow by Xiran J. Zhao. So you've read it. I believe you gave it 5 stars, correct?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
What I have to say is not going to surprise you, but for anyone who's just now listening to the podcast and is unaware that Jesse has talked about this, I've already forgotten how to pronounce some of the names, but I will do my best. Xiran lives in a futuristic sci-fi Chinese world where the population idolizes these pilots who use, essentially, for lack of better words, giant mechs to fight off their enemy across the border. But women are forced to be co-pilots for reasons explained in the books, no spoilers. And it can kill them because, of course, they just aren't as strong as men, apparently, when connecting to the machine and when, like, mind melding to their co-pilot. So Zeshian is initially trying to exact revenge for her sister, who died exactly this way, by entering into this program and trying to reach the man who caused her sister's death. Of course, it's going to be no surprise, go figure, she becomes a pilot, and pretty quickly, the book proceeds on from there with her life being part of this program and getting inside and figuring out all the little details and trying to solve the mystery of, like, why are women weaker? Why can't they stand it the way men can, you know? I got a lot of vibes on this book. So I got Hunger Games because these people are forced into dangerous situations. I got Power Rangers, obviously, because of giant transforming mechs devices. Definitely got a lot of Pacific Rim vibes, which is kaiju versus robot, if you've never seen Pacific Rim. And just any anime. Just picture anime and you get anime vibes. It's like, okay. There's a heavy emphasis on Chinese tradition and how women are looked down upon in culture as well. I feel like the author may have very strong negative or hateful feelings towards tradition and very much wanted to, like, take that down in her book of just like, okay, we're going to break all these stupid rules and I'm going to make good reasons for everything. And I don't know, I just felt like she had some personal feelings in this book and they definitely came out. It pits a couple of interesting moral dilemmas as well that come up throughout the novel, especially with her family who, like, you know, when you're trained a certain way or brought up a certain way, when you're told to think a certain way, it's like, okay, well, this is how I am, this is my being, but, like, so they kind of come off as awful people, like, well, we're just raising our daughters to go do this thing for the Chinese, you know, we have to save our world, or we have to save our land from the enemy, and, you know, clearly we don't love you, we're just raising you to go die, basically, and, you know, how does she treat that when certain things come up in the book, like, well, does your family deserve this, do they deserve that, they can't help the way they are, it's how they were raised in society, and blah, 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 blah. So a lot of really, like, I don't know who to side with, like, do I feel bad for the family, or do I not, do I feel bad for her, or do I not? She takes lots of interesting, the main character is Xiran, she takes lots of interesting twists and turns in this book. By the end of it, I'm not sure how I feel about her place and what she has said and done and whatever. I was surprised by how quickly the book changed from being something that seems like it's going to be very action-packed in anime and giant robot fighting to, like, all of a sudden being much more dramatic with downtime and personal story and drama. Like, it's like a hit of a button twist. Like, okay, now, like, we're a whole different book, which was really interesting. So before I talk about the rest of it, I gave the book 3 out of 5 stars. A solid, good 3 out of 5 stars. Not like, don't really read it. Because I think you should. I think it's a pretty good book. So some of my more negative comments is that I did feel, given that this is like a technically, like, I don't know how you want to define it, magical science fiction universe, it kind of pits both together. The behind the scenes and the world building was a little bit lacking for me. I needed to know more about how the systems work. Like, they talk about Chi, they talk about the transforming robots, they talk about the enemy, but it feels very surface level, and I don't like that I have to feel like I'm filling in the blanks. I just wanted to know more. Like, I felt muddled. I think I even texted or talked to you when I was first starting the book, and I was like, now, am I being dumb and I'm not understanding this, or am I going to get explanations later? And you said, I'll get explanations later, and you do, but I still want more. I'm still like, okay, these things work because the author says, but I need, like, the inner workings, as you know, because otherwise I'm just, like, stopping every other sentence and trying to figure out why. Like, I need to know the full picture, and that drives me crazy when I don't. When I finish this book, it does finish abruptly. It ends, and you're like, wait, who tore out the rest of the pages? I did not know there was a second book coming out. The ending is extremely abrupt. It's a hard change of pace out of left field. Like, I was reading the ending of an entirely different book, and it definitely felt like, oh, this is like a weird 70s or 80s, like, sci-fi ending novel. Like, it was a whole different vibe in my mind. I definitely want to read the next one, and now that we've both read this, we'll probably read it at the same time.
I think
whether or not we do a main quest on it, I don't know. Maybe we'd do a second novel as a main quest, but we can definitely talk about that. Maybe we just do the series in general, because I believe it's just duology, right?
We'll see.
I think it's a duology. I think I read that somewhere. I also had issues with the ending. Obviously, I can't talk about the ending, but like I said, very left field. And I was Googling online because I was like, am I just an idiot with this? Did I not see this coming? And there seems to be two sides of the story. There's one side of the story of people like me, like, what? Oh my god, I'm mind blown. Like, I don't know what I'm reading. And then the other side, people are like, no, the author did such good foreshadowing. Look at this, 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 and this. And they'll list, like, paragraphs and pages, and you're reading it. And you're like, okay, I guess if I really think about it, that was technically foreshadowing, but, like, I don't think it's good foreshadowing. I think it was like, okay, sure, if I heavily think about it and go back through the entire book, I will find those examples, but they weren't strong for me. But, mix of good, mix of bad. I am ready for the second one. I had the second title written down, but it is not here in front of me, but that's okay. I don't know when it comes out, but I'm sure we'll read it.
Yes. I'm glad you read it. I completely understand where I think it's very interesting because where you want the world building, I just don't care. I just accept it. And like afterward, I'm like, oh yeah, that is a good question. But in the moment, I'm just like, yeah, it's whatever. I think the interpersonal is more important for me, and like I guess it depends on the point of view of the characters or whatever. But that internal side.
As my favorite author, Brandon Sanderson, always says, if you don't ask the questions while you're reading the book or watching a movie, then it did a good job, regardless of plot holes, etc. But if you're questioning it during the book, then there's issues. So the fact that you didn't ask or think about the questions until after the novel means it was a good... Yeah, it worked for you. It's exactly what you needed or wanted.
Yeah.
I only have one book left, so you can do a couple.
Okay. I have two really quick books. We have talked about this every week, all the time.
Here we go.
Yep. I finished the Cape Bay Mystery series. And this one was called Punch, Pastries, and Poison by Harper Lynn. Again, we're following cafe owner Francesca Amara as she solves a mystery. And this mystery was she was the victim. Someone came to her birthday party that she invited everyone to her cafe and poisoned something, and everyone got sick. So, of course, her being a little bit, like, naive, I guess, she just thought everyone got food poisoning, which is mind-blowing to her because she cooked everything. But obviously the title is Punch and Pastries and Poison. So someone poisoned everyone. People were rushed to the hospital. People almost died. She was very, very sick herself. And I gave it a 5 out of 5. I literally finished it and was like, I want to restart the series. So
this is the last book, right?
It is, and I was so
it ends
sad.
On a 5 out of 5. That's
it
perfect.
Ends on
I
a
love
5
it.
out of 5. I'm so excited. I think I said this in our last side quest, but we do have a book prepped that is by Harper coming up for a main quest. It's really short and it should be a fun little mystery for us. But I'm interested to see another series of hers because I've been listening to this for a long time now. And then the other series that I'm slowly working on because
I have one question.
Yeah.
Because I don't remember all of your reviews. So is this the best one in the series, or do you have a top pick?
I would have to look, but I think this and maybe the first or second also had a 5. And then there was like 3s and 4s the whole way through.
And is this a series that you can just pick one up in the middle and read it as a cozy mystery?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if anyone's interested, you can pick one. It's okay. You don't have to read all 10 books.
Yeah. And again, like I got them from my library on Libby, and they're literally 4 hours. I think the longest was maybe like 5 hours and 15 minutes. And so, you get them very quickly if you're on the wait list, and you can listen to them in a day. So,
okay, there you go.
Yeah.
Easy read.
And then the other super easy read that I read was Lore Olympus Volume 2, written by Rachel Smythe.
Wait, is this the white book, the book Lore?
No.
Or is this something else? Oh, okay.
This is something else. So Lore Olympus was originally a like webtoons comic. I think it was webtoons. And it is a Hades and Persephone retelling. And
Gasp.
really it's beautifully, it's a graphic novel or a graphic
novel, yeah.
Yeah. It's the story, like I read it in under an hour. The story is very limited because it is more on the picture side, but it is beautiful. And I did read past where the physical books are on the webtoons before they started making them into books. So I know where we're going. They have made a couple little changes, like added things that she didn't add originally.
Oh.
And I gave it a 3 out of 5. But again, it's because I can, plan to keep going. But I know where it's going, and I know, like, it was very much a building book. I recommend them. They are, teenage plus. None of the pictures are bad or anything. Like I said, it's very beautiful. There are some more adult type themes. But yeah, really fun, really easy read. And I look forward to more. Again, even if you just like want to look at something pretty.
Just enjoy the artwork. Yep.
Yeah.
I've opened mini a graphic novel just for the artwork. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have one more. Do you want to talk about yours and then I will finish us up?
Sure. That sounds good. I read. Okay, so we're going back to my roots of like hardcore sci-fi fantasy. So I did a science fiction novel. This is definitely a science fiction novel. This is called The Engines of God by Jack McDevitt. And this has been a book that's been on my list for, I'm sure, 10 plus years now. I think this came out late 90s or something. I don't have the exact info. But it's the kind of science fiction novel, space sci-fi specifically, that will like put butterflies in my stomach reading the description. Like I have to read this. Like very, I love books like this that take place in space and focus on the bigger universe and the big picture, but it's like in full realism, not like ridiculous. Like how empty and scary space is. Are there other things out there? Ancient alien races that are better than us. Technology that is different. What kind of weird things can actually happen in space that like our brains can't even fathom because we just haven't advanced far enough, like very like Interstellar, like you feel empty and the universe is huge and there's weird things going on and weird ideas to wrap your mind around. And so I just wrote up the short blurb. I don't know if I wrote this or if I copied and pasted it, but it's like 2 sentences. So no, I definitely did not write this on my own. Just looking at it, I recognize this. Okay. Humans call them the Monument Makers, an unknown race. They left stunning alien statues on distant planets in the galaxy. Each relic is different, Each inscription defies translation, yet all are heartbreakingly beautiful. And for planet Earth, on the brink of disaster, they may hold the only key to survival for the entire human race. Now, right off the bat, I always hate when it's like, oh, it's for the entire Earth's survival. You know, it's like the most generic thing to do. But in this case, it's very realistic. Earth is spiraling out of control with climate change, wars, just generally massive but realistic issues all over the world. The book will pause here and there to just throw out news headlines at you, which are all like really bad things. And it's just like, yeah, I can see this happening to our Earth in like 10 years, let alone this future. The book takes place in the year 2203. And I'm like, yeah, some of this stuff is happening now because, you know, it's an older book, so the author wouldn't know that. But it felt very close to home where it's like, 2203, try 2023. Like, so it's like, yeah, that's a little scary. So the novel takes place in space. It takes place on other distant worlds and on Earth. And what's kind of interesting is whenever they're on Earth, they're actually typically in like our backyard, like DC, Arlington, Alexandria, but it's like the year 2203. So they don't go into like a ton of detail on what the future looks like, but it was weird whenever like I'm reading this novel, they're like out in space and like light years away, and then it's like, okay, but now we're back in DC, and it's like, this is really like off-putting. I can picture what they're describing and stuff. So that was cool to have like a futuristic novel close to like where I live, basically. Okay, so early in this story, when they are trying to decipher the alien writing, they are on a destroyed planet, and they're looking for anything on this planet to act as their Rosetta Stone, so they can start translation. Can they find a book? Can they find like a shop that had language in some form, you know, something to give them an idea of how to start translating the writing? They will eventually come across, again, early on, I'm not really spoiling anything, and it's technically in the title, but they finally eventually come across some text and that they can read it. And it's a large paragraph, but I've just taken out the end portion of it. So this is it says, "He will come who treads the dawn, tramples the sun beneath his feet, and judges the souls of men. He will stride across the rooftops, and he will fire the engines of God." So throughout the novel, they're wondering what the heck are the engines of God and who's going to fire them? Like, what is going on? So that's a large part of the novel. It's, you know, you're watching the human race spiral out of control. They're trying to decipher alien writing. They're trying to find a way to save themselves, basically. This book is technically a series, but I believe it's the kind of series where different things happen in each book, so you might not necessarily have to read them in order, but don't quote me on that. I kind of got Dune vibes, like, okay, you can read Dune book 1, and if you never read the rest, you're good, you're done. Which you've done. You've read the first Dune book, I've read the first Dune book. So it kind of comes off like that for me, but yeah, it's just the kind of like big empty space. God, the universe is so grand, and what little we actually know. Like that's what I really liked about it. It does have its dull moments. Like it's kind of just like sometimes it's them in their ship or trapped or something where it's just like a little bit of downtime and you're sort of just trying to read through the downtime. It's a pretty big novel. But overall, I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Some really interesting things happen. Some really emotional things happen. It's the kind of book where I really can't tell you too many things because it is sort of a sci-fi mystery novel. I wouldn't define it in the genre of mystery, but mystery is what it leans on given the nature of the book. But that is The Engines of God.
Not something that I'm like, oh, I want to read that, but it's not my genre at all.
It's not. It's heavy sci-fi. Like, if you saw the cover, you'd be like, yeah, I'm not touching that.
Yeah, I know. I already, like, it's one of those things where I'm like, I don't know, a variant of that I would be interested in. Mm-hmm. But knowing that it has a more sci-fi bend, I'm like, it's cool, but not my thing.
It's not the book I would ever recommend for us to do a main quest on, that's for sure.
Well, and in turn, this next book is not your thing.
Okay.
So we have another Persephone's and Hades retelling. So this is A Touch of Ruin by Scarlett St. Clair. It is book 2 of what I thought was 3, but when I was looking up the book on Amazon just now, just to make sure I wasn't insane, she has 3 Hades X Persephone series, and then she has 2 things called the Hades Saga, which I think are novellas. And it literally, there was a picture on on her like author screen, and it was like, you need to read it in this order. So I skipped the first novella, and so now I have to go back and read that. But basically, in the first book, Hades and Persephone are fated to have the relationship just like in the myth, but this is in present day. And so they're known to the mortals. They have, like, they run all the businesses. They run all the, Aphrodite has the best, what's it called? Like, she owns boutiques, and Apollo, he's also the god of music. We talked earlier, he's the god of prophecy. He's also the god of music. And he has all the nightclubs. And then Hades has, like, the seedy nightclubs. And everyone knows that they all exist, and like there's, they're just basically celebrities. I think so the main city that they all live in is called New Olympus, and in my head it's like a very shiny version of New York City. So think like everything white and pristine, no garbage or anything like that. And so in the first book, like I said, they're meeting, she's out in the world for the first time. She's going to college. She doesn't really have her own magic. And then in this second book, their relationship has gone public. And people now, they all wear glamours, all the gods and goddesses. So they look mortal or mortal adjacent. And her glamour makes her look like she's pure mortal. And so no one realizes, not even her roommate, that mousy little news reporter intern is a goddess. She doesn't flaunt it. She wants to make her own money. She doesn't take any money from Demeter, which is her mother. She lives in like, the $500 hole in the wall with too many girls. But she has tons, she has the potential, like if she just wanted to, she could have everything she desires. So everyone thinks she's just like this little mortal hussy, basically, that has captured Hades' attention today, but tomorrow she'll be gone, kind of thing. Okay. And she has to deal with the fallout of all of that. At the same time, she has to deal with the knowledge that the fates have decided that she will eventually be queen of the dead, and rule alongside Hades, and having to get all of her powers under control. So she has a lot of things going on. There's lots of other tragedy, lots of people figuring out what she is. And it's a really beautiful story because you get this juxtaposition of New Olympus, it's white and shiny, and, the main city with the mortals. And then the underworld, which is beautiful in a very different, dark, gothic way. And it's created and changed all by Hades and his desires. So if he realizes that Persephone really likes blue flowers, he will use his magic to put blue flowers everywhere. So you get a lot of description of like, little groves that he's made for her, or something he's done to kind of show his love for her. It's spicy. It is a romance novel. It is an adult romance novel. It is not for the faint of heart.
Oh, so this is not a teen retelling. Okay.
This is not for teens. And I'm sure you can look it up. There's probably some sort of like, I don't want to say trigger warnings because that's not exactly right, but like Hades and Persephone in this retelling are awful at communicating. So there's some fighting and there's some misunderstanding and there's some like they're 100-year-old gods. I'm sure I haven't looked it up, but I'm sure that there's people out there who are like, this is horrible. He's abusive. She's abusive.
Okay, yeah.
Random other people are abusive. And really it's like if they were just like, hey, I would appreciate if you talked to me next time type of thing, then none of the craziness would ensue. I really liked it. I gave this one a 5 out of 5. And it was more because there was a lot I didn't expect. There was like people from the first book who you kind of are like thought to hate or think that they're like ditzy or whatever. There's more depth to them and there's new relationships formed and people brought in that make it really interesting. I honestly don't know what I rated the first one. I would have to go back and look. But yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I want to, once they're all out, I don't even know if they're all out, but I would want to read them all in order again, like back to back, instead of like years apart. So,
yeah, once it's all out, you'll just do it all together. Yeah, that makes sense.
And I will say that I read it very quickly once I sat down and read it. Like, if I'm like totaling the time, probably a couple, like 3 or 4 days total. Again, very fast read, good tempo. Things are happening very rapidly. Again, I don't think it would be a book for you. I don't think it would be like the world is not there. Like, it's nice and pretty, but at the same time, it's not like, oh, wow, I know everything about how these divine beings work. There's questions there, even for me. So,
yeah.
But yeah.
All right. So, as far as like retellings or just general stories about gods and what have you, I guess Hades and Persephone is like kind of a big thing. Like, I never hear anyone reading about the retellings of like almost anything else for the most part. It's always Hades and Persephone. Like, I know other books are out there. I've seen them, especially kids' novels for sure. But Hades and Persephone seems like the big one. Like, those are always...
I think they're having a moment.
Yeah.
I think that it ebbs and flows and that they will... There's a lot coming out about them right now, but then it'll switch and there'll be a lot about like Athena. That book you mentioned earlier, Lore, has more. I have read that also. That is a YA, and it's more based on other... I don't even know if Hades is in that. Persephone, I don't think at all. So
I'll be reading that book soon because I have the copy I have your
copy.
Yeah. So I'll be reading that soon. So that'll be a side quest one day. Who knows when?
Yeah. Well, I feel like this was a really good, lots of exciting books, lots of different books, and I just want to like go read now. So
I know I'm about to go multitask. I have the physical book and the audio for our main quest next week, the Ballad of Perilous Graves. So that is literally what I'm going to do as soon as we get off the podcast. So
awesome. I'm excited. I can't wait to hear more and read more.
All right. Well, until next time, we will see you guys soon.
Bye.
Bye.